If you're looking for a story that just perfectly captures how high-stakes politics can slam right into the nitty-gritty of legal procedure, this is it.
It really is something else.
We're doing a deep dive into a case involving an Irish-speaking rapper charged under terrorism laws, believe it or not.
Right.
Only for the whole thing to collapse, completely voided. And
Right.
why? A technicality, like the thinnest possible technicality, a
Yeah.
one-day admin error.
Sounds unbelievable, but yeah, that's what happened. So our mission today is really to get past the headlines about Liam Ogumo hAnnaidh Mo Chara from Kneecap. That's his stage name.
Yeah.
We want to unpack three key things from all the reports and sources we've looked at. First, what exactly was the allegation, legally and politically?
Yeah.
Second, what's the legal safeguard that's supposed to govern these cases, and how did it fail here? Specifically, this single-day error.
And third,
And third, why did this failure cause such a huge political reaction? It's arguably one of the most high-profile legal collapses we've seen in the UK recently.
okay, so let's start with the man himself. Mo Chara, he's 27, part of this Belfast rap trio, Kneecap. And understanding the band is, I think, crucial here,
Yeah,
because their whole profile shapes the context for this charge.
absolutely essential. Kneecap, that's Mo Chara, Moglai, and DJ Provai. They got together around 2017. What makes them stand out is, well, first, they rap mainly in Irish, in Gaeilge.
Which is pretty unique in itself for rap.
Totally. But it's also their content. It's deliberately provocative. They really push boundaries in their music, their merchandise, lots of stuff about Irish identity, anti-establishment themes, social justice issues.
And we're not talking about some underground act here. They've got serious cultural clout, right, which probably makes them a bigger target.
Exactly. That semi-fictionalized film about them, it starred Michael Fassbender, Oscar nominee Michael Fassbender.
Wow.
And it won a BAFTA just back in February 2025. So they have this significant global platform, and, they definitely use it. And this background is so important because it explains their reaction the second this terrorism charge landed. They immediately said, nope, this is political. This is about silencing us.
Right. They framed it instantly. So let's get to the charge itself. The incident that kicked this all off happened back in November 2024. It was during a concert.
Yeah, a gig at the O2 Forum in Kentish Town, London.
And the specific allegation was?
The sources allege that during the show, Mo Chara displayed a flag supporting Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah, as you probably know, is a proscribed or banned organization here in the UK.
So displaying support, that's a serious offense under UK terrorism legislation.
And a very serious offense, inherently explosive, like you said.
But the charge itself wasn't actually brought until May 2025. That's quite a gap. November 24 to May 25.
And that gap, that timeline, that's what turned out to be absolutely critical. It set up the whole problem.
And Mo Chara and the band, as you said, they didn't just deny it. They went straight for the motive, calling it political from day one.
Exactly. They challenged the state's whole intention, which, made the eventual outcome in court even more dramatic.
Okay, let's shift to that courtroom drama then. Woolwich Crown Court. The Chief Magistrate, Paul Goldspring, he ruled the charge was unlawful and null. Just gone.
About. And apparently the courtroom erupted in applause when he announced it.
But that applause, it was purely for a procedural win, wasn't it? It wasn't about the flag itself.
That's the absolute key thing to understand here. The court never actually got to the stage of hearing evidence about the flag or whether displaying it broke the law. The whole case died before that.
Ow.
It failed entirely because of a statutory time limit. There's a rule. For this kind of offense, the prosecution has to be brought within 6 months of the alleged incident.
6 months. Okay. This is where we need to zoom in, I think.
Right.
Because for a charge this serious terrorism-related, why is there such a strict deadline? And what's this about consent playing a role?
Right. This is the core of the deep dive, really. When you're dealing with prosecutions that touch on sensitive stuff like terrorism or things with heavy political implications, the law puts in place a really important safeguard, a constitutional check, essentially.
What's a safeguard? How does it work?
Well, the charge simply cannot proceed legally without the explicit consent of one of the UK's top law officers. Usually it's the Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP, or sometimes the Attorney General, the AG.
So it's not just like any old case file getting stamped. It needs a very senior sign-off. Why? What's the point of that extra layer?
It's meant to be a check and balance. Think about it. These rules are there to try and stop, politically motivated prosecutions, or maybe arbitrary ones, or just weak cases being pushed forward perhaps by local police or more junior prosecutors without proper oversight. The idea is, especially for cases that could impact things like freedom of expression, like displaying a political flag, which is inherently political, a very senior independent figure has to personally review it. They have to decide if it's actually in the public interest to prosecute before the person is formally charged.
Okay, so the clock is ticking. Yeah. 6 months. But it's not just 6 months to file the charge. It's 6 months to get everything sorted, including that crucial DPP or AG consent.
Exactly right. And that is precisely where the prosecution messed up. Spectacularly. They missed the deadline by, well, the narrowest possible margin.
How narrow?
The chief magistrate spelled out the timeline. Incident, November 2024. So the 6-month deadline basically ran out sometime in May 2025.
Okay, so what was the specific error? Where did the timing go wrong?
The problem was the DPP's consent. The official permission to prosecute, it wasn't actually obtained until May 22nd.
May 22nd. But when was Mo Chara charged?
He was formally charged the day before, on May 21st. So the magistrate looked at it and said, okay, even if we're generous and say the charge was effectively instituted when the final consent was given May 22nd.
Yeah.
That date, May 22nd, was 6 months and 1 day after the original incident at the London gig.
1 day. 6 months and a day. That is incredible.
Yeah.
A major terrorism-related prosecution collapsing because of a 24-hour window based on when someone signed a form.
Incredible, but that's the law.
Yeah.
And that single day meant the whole charging process was fundamentally flawed from the start. The magistrate's ruling was very clear on this. He said, and I'm quoting here, the proceedings were not instituted in the correct form, lacking the necessary DPP and AG consent within the 6-month statutory time limit.
And not instituted in the correct form. What does that actually mean in practical terms to the court?
It means the court literally had no power to hear the case. It had no jurisdiction to try the charge, as the ruling stated.
Right.
Think of jurisdiction like the court's legal license to operate on a particular case. If the case isn't brought correctly, if those procedural safeguards designed to prevent state overreach aren't followed to the letter,
then the court has to stop.
It has to stop. It's legally obliged to. They couldn't even begin to look at the evidence about the flag or the politics behind it because the process used to bring the charge was invalid from the get-go.
Void. That's just, wow. The implications are huge. The state brings this incredibly serious charge, uses its powerful legal machine, but its own failure to follow its own rules means the court can't even assess the facts.
Exactly.
Which I suppose feeds directly into that narrative of Mo Chara and the band were pushing that this was political overreach.
It absolutely does. And the defense lawyer, Jude Bunting Casey, he didn't mince words afterwards. He said the case was every bit unjustified as it was flawed. The system itself basically confirmed the flawed part, which obviously lends weight to their unjustified claim.
Okay, let's talk about that political fallout then. Because given Kneecap's profile, this wasn't just a quiet legal ruling, was it? Mo Chara's statement outside court, it wasn't really about legal time limits.
Not at all. He went straight for the geopolitical context, highly critical. He claimed the prosecution was never about any threat to the public and never about terrorism.
What?
But always about Gaza, he said, about what happens if you dare to speak up. He framed the whole thing as the state using terror laws to try and shut down speech about Palestine.
And he made it clear he felt they'd failed, saying he won't be silenced.
Right. And the whole band echoed that. Their manager, Daniel Lambert, he framed it as a clear victory, saying political policing has failed.
And he added that interesting detail, didn't he? About their record.
Yeah, a very specific point he made sure got into the reports. Kneecap, as a band, has no charges or convictions against them in any country, ever. Which kind of underscores their position as, agitators maybe, but fundamentally operating within the law.
And Moglai, another band member, he seemed relieved, saying they could now finally talk about Palestine and stop talking about Kneecap.
Yeah, you can sense the pressure they must have been under. That quote really highlights what a massive distraction this whole legal battle must have been for them.
And the political reaction went right to the top in Northern Ireland, didn't it?
It did. First Minister Michelle O'Neill welcomed the ruling straight away, and she explicitly linked it to the wider conflict, calling the charges a calculated attempt to silence those who stand up and speak out against the Israeli genocide in Gaza. Strong words.
So the case clearly resonated very deeply within Northern Irish politics, where, let's face it, issues around state power, policing, political expression, They're always incredibly sensitive.
Definitely. And remember, we talked about their history. They'd already successfully sued the UK government back in November 2024 over that withdrawn arts grant, the Kemi Badenoch situation.
Ah, yes, I remember that.
So they already had this track record of successfully challenging official bodies. This latest win, even though it was procedural, just adds to that image they have as these sort of anti-establishment figures who can take on the system and win.
It certainly bolsters their argument that this prosecution was, targeted.
Yeah.
Especially when, you remember, they just courted controversy at Coachella in April 25, again with messages about Gaza. They seem to consistently operate right on that edge.
They do. They use their platform very intentionally, which guarantees they remain controversial figures.
So what about the other side? The prosecution. This kind of procedural failure, collapsing a major case like this, that's got to be a huge headache internally for the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS. Are they just accepting it?
Oh, definitely not taking it lying down. The official CPS statement said they're reviewing the decision of the court carefully, and the key word there is reviewing. They also explicitly mentioned they're considering an appeal.
Appealing a procedural ruling.
Yes. Because an error like this, one that voids a serious terrorism charge simply because the paperwork wasn't done on the right day, that demands a serious internal look and potentially a challenge to the magistrate's interpretation or application of the rules.
And the police must be looking closely, too.
Absolutely. The Met Police spokesperson confirmed they'll be working closely with the CPS to understand the ruling's potential implications for how they handle similar cases in the future.
Right. Because if the process for getting consent in these super sensitive cases is so fragile that being off by one day brings the whole thing crashing down, well, that puts every future case under a microscope, doesn't it?
It raises a really important question, actually. Does this strict 6-month time limit realistically give prosecutors enough runway? Enough time to do the kind of sensitive investigation needed and get that vital senior sign-off from the DPP or AG?
That's a good point. Was the delay just like administrative slowness? Or could it suggest maybe the investigators were finding it hard to build a case strong enough to actually convince the DPP to give consent, and they ended up dragging their feet until time ran out?
We don't know for sure from the outside, but the outcome certainly shows the rule of law, that strict adherence to procedure overriding perhaps the political desire to prosecute in this specific instance. The safeguard, the check and balance, it worked. Maybe ironically, it worked in favor of the very people who were claiming political persecution.
Okay, so let's pull this all together for everyone listening. We've taken a deep dive into this really high-profile case. It had all the explosive ingredients, politics around Gaza, Hezbollah, freedom of speech, but it collapsed. Not because the rapper proved his innocence regarding the flag, but because the state missed a crucial, constitutionally embedded deadline for getting the DPP's consent. Missed it by 24 hours.
It's just a stark demonstration of legal procedure acting like a firewall, isn't it? Even against the most serious allegations. If the paperwork isn't right, the state's authority to prosecute just evaporates.
So this ruling really forces us to think about how the state's bureaucracy, its own internal processes, handle these intensely politically charged incidents. Given that the case died purely on this procedural point and error the CPS is now reviewing, possibly appealing, what does this really tell us? What does it reveal about the practical fragility of trying to prosecute these kinds of offenses under the Proscribed Organizations Act when you're racing against these tight statutory clocks?
That is the lingering question, isn't it? Does the very rigidity of the procedure, the strictness of the rules, does it inadvertently create a kind of loophole for people who know how to put in those time limits, or maybe push controversial boundaries right up to the wire? Or does it simply reaffirm a fundamental principle? That when the state seeks to prosecute speech, especially politically charged speech, it absolutely must meet the highest possible standard of procedural correctness. It has to ensure those safeguards designed to protect citizens are always followed, no exceptions.
It definitely makes you wonder how many other sensitive cases might be vulnerable if that administrative diligence doesn't quite keep up with political intent or urgency. A really fascinating look at the power of procedure and the clock. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.